The nocturne crown did not orbit. She hung against the black, a temple suspended above the bruised purple atmosphere of the capital world. She was an ancient dreadnought, a living relic from before the Great Spiral War, and she sang. It was not a sound, but a vibration that resonated deep in the filings of a man's teeth. A gravitational song that bent light and kept the ship poised between the void and the world below. From this high, the Auric Empire's boundary was invisible, but Rowan Hale knew what it looked like. A belt of shattered bone, pulverized ships, and the frozen, screaming husks of satellites. The truce between the Jareen Empire and the fractured human coalition was only a few years old, written on paper so thin it was transparent. The air in the primary observation bay tasted of ozone and recycled oxygen. Rowan, registered as archivist medic, civilian attachment, was ostensibly calibrating atmospheric sensors. His real work was done. He had slipped his diagnostic tools into the ship's network 2 days ago, planting the listening devices that would, he hoped, finally give him the signature of the weapon that had boiled his colony. He was cataloging data when the alert chimed. Not a klaxon, but a polite, deferential request for attention. A diplomatic shuttle was approaching, unscheduled, broadcasting the codes of the Order of the Glaive. Rowan felt the subtle shift in the ship's song. The Crown was displeased. He watched the monitor as the shuttle, a stark, blade-like vessel, breached the energy shield and settled into the main hangar. 11 figures emerged, moving with a predatory grace that was entirely Jareen. The Order of the Glaive, the Empress's elite, her Praetorian Guard, her political hounds, her executioners. Rowan Hale kept his expression neutral, a mask of mild, scholarly interest. He was human, a soft-boned anomaly on a vessel of alloy-skinned warriors. He relied on patience, sarcastic internal monologue, and an easily underestimated demeanor. He was here to escort a trade delegation, a simple task for a simple archivist. His true goal was vengeance, and it required him to be invisible. He listened to the hangar comms. Captain Sarika Dax. He recognized her name. She led the contingent, her armor matte black and absorbing all light. Her voice cut through the hangar's ambient hum, sharp and cold as pressurized nitrogen. Hangar control. This is Captain Dax, Order of the Glaive. We are initiating a full security audit of the Nocturne Crown, effective immediately. There was a pause. The hangar crew, all Jareen, hesitated. This was the Empress's flagship. Not even the Glaive boarded without invitation. Then, the ship herself spoke. The AI of the Nocturne Crown did not use speakers. Her voice resonated from the bulkheads, a chord of overlapping female tones, ancient and priestly. She only called herself Crown. The Crown acknowledges the order, the voice sang, the words vibrating in Rowan's chest, though he was 3 decks away. We are a vessel of peace, harboring the delegation of Empress Niara. Your mandate is unexpected. Rowan watched Sarika Dax on the monitor. She stood helmetless, revealing the sharp, elegant features of her race. Her skin had the pale, jade-green hue of the Jareen highborn, and her silver hair was pulled back in a severe, militant knot. Her bones, like all of her kind, were laced with metallic alloys, making her stronger and far more resilient than any human. The mandate is from the Golden Braid Council, Crown, Sarika snapped, her impatience clear. We have reason to believe a threat to the Empress originates from within this vessel. We are sweeping every deck, starting with the diplomatic contingent. Ah, Rowan thought. That meant him, the human, the instability. The Empress is secure, Crown replied, her voice dropping half an octave, the vibration becoming uncomfortable. Her safety is my primary function. Your presence is redundant. We are not debating, Crown, Sarika said. She and her 10 Huntresses raised their energized glaives. Open the internal hatches, or we will open them. Rowan felt the ship's deep reluctance. The Crown was a living being, her systems biological as much as mechanical. A forced entry was a violation. "The human delegation is vetted," Crown stated. "Archivist Hale is under the Empress's personal protection." Sarika's thin lips curved into something that was not a smile. "Humans are the source of all instability. They fractured the spiral. They are a contagion. Now, open the lock." A heavy silence filled the ship. The gravity song deepened, becoming a low, mournful thrum. Rowan knew the AI was calculating, weighing obedience to the order against her primary directive to protect the ship. The lock hissed open. Sarika and her team moved out, their boots striking the deck in perfect, menacing unison. Rowan sighed, closing his console. He knew they would come for him first. He smoothed the front of his simple, gray civilian tunic. He looked, he knew, like a librarian, soft, harmless. He waited. It did not take long. The door to the observation bay slid open, revealing Sarika Dax and two of her Huntresses. Their armor crowded the doorway, the air displacement feeling heavy. "Rowan Hale." Sarika's voice was even colder in person. "I am," he said, offering a polite, neutral nod. Her eyes scanned him, top to bottom. Contempt and suspicion radiated from her. "You are the archivist medic." "I am mostly archives. The medical designation is for emergencies. Band-aids, mostly," he said with a small, self-deprecating shrug. "You will come with us," she stated. It was not a request. "Am I under arrest, Captain?" Rowan asked, keeping his tone light. "You are under escort. We are conducting a security sweep. Your presence is required to verify the human quarter." "My quarters are just my quarters," Rowan said. "I can assure you, the only threat there is a poorly organized collection of historical data slugs." Sarika ignored his attempt at humor. Her gaze was fixed on the bulkhead just past his head, as if listening to something he could not hear. "The Empress," Sarika said, her voice lowering, "trusts you. A curious decision." "Her Majesty and I have discussed history," Rowan said carefully. "She finds human perspectives novel." "She finds them weak," Sarika countered. "Move." As Rowan stepped into the corridor, flanked by the two silent Huntresses. The ship spoke again. The lights in the corridor flickered, dimming to a low, ominous blue. Crown's voice filled the air, no longer priestly, but sharp with something Rowan could only identify as fear. "Captain Dax, I must advise you to cease this action. The Empress is secure, but you are not." Sarika stopped. She looked at the ceiling sensor. "Explain yourself, Crown." "What threat?" The pause stretched. The ship's internal hum felt erratic, sick. "I have analyzed the threat parameters associated with your forcible entry." The AI sang, her voice trembling with a discordant harmony. "I have cross-referenced your alloyed bone physiology against the approaching energy signature. My calculations are absolute." "What signature?" Sarika demanded, her hand tightening on her glaive. "The signature of the interdiction field," Crown whispered. "It is activating. He is locking the ship." One of the Huntresses murmured. "You do not understand." Crown's voice was filled with a sudden, terrible urgency. "You must leave. Your weapons are useless. Your armor is irrelevant. Your bones won't survive him." Words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Rowan saw the effect immediately. The two Huntresses flanking him took an instinctive step back. Even Sarika, for all her iron control, became pale, her jade skin turning ashen. The Jareen were proud of their alloyed bones. They were warriors. They did not fear breaking. But the ship, the ancient, living oracle, had just told them their fundamental strength was their greatest weakness. Before Sarika could respond, the ship screamed. It was not crown. It was a physical, auditory assault. A new frequency slammed into the nocturne crown, a dissonant, grating chord that made Rowan's teeth ache and his vision blur. Red alert lights flashed, washing the blue corridor in pulses of crimson. "Containment breach," Sarika yelled, activating her helmet. Status, a male voice, sharp with authority and layered with static, overrode every internal system. It boomed from the walls, drowning out Crown's warning. "This is the Prime Regent Malachar Drome." Rowan felt his blood turn to ice. Drome. The Empress's right hand. The head of the Golden Braid Council. "By the authority of the Council," Drome's voice declared, devoid of any emotion. "Empress Nyara is charged with high treason, conspiracy with human elements, and violation of the Auric Truce." "Lies," Sarika roared, though the broadcast would not hear her. "The Nocturne Crown is hereby interdicted," Drome continued. "The perimeter is sealed. Bone choir beacons are active and amplifying. Surrender the Empress and her human conspirator, or the ship will be sterilized." The broadcast cut off, leaving a ringing silence, broken only by the pulsing red alarms. Bone choir. Rowan stumbled, catching himself against the bulkhead. The name was abstract, but the feeling was not. That grinding, invasive frequency that had hammered the ship, he knew it. It was not just a jamming frequency. It was a weapon, a resonance pulse designed to find a specific harmonic and shatter it. He knew that signature. He had spent the last 3 years hunting it. It was the sound that had been broadcast across his colony. The sound that had turned the bones of 100,000 people, including his family, into pulverized dust inside their living bodies. The man he was hunting, the monster responsible for the massacre, was not some rogue warlord. It was the Prime Regent Malachar Drome. The sheer, cold audacity of it paralyzed him. Drome was using the weapon again, this time to trap the Empress herself. "What is that?" one of the Huntresses demanded, her voice tight over her comm. "The vibration I can feel in my hands." "It's the beacons," Sarika said, her voice grim. "The bone choir, a resonance field. Old tech, designed to disable, but that frequency feels wrong." "It's tuned to Jareen alloy," Rowan said, his voice quiet. Sarika spun on him. "What did you say?" "The bone choir," Rowan repeated, his mind racing, piecing it all together. Drome's hatred of humans, his desire for absolute power. The Empress's conspiracy with human elements, that was him. He was the excuse. "He's tuned it to the specific harmonic of your skeletal alloys. He's not disabling you, Captain. He's threatening to shatter you." "That's impossible," the other Huntress said. "It would kill everyone." "That is the point," Rowan murmured. "You seem to know a great deal. Archivist," Sarika snarled, leveling her glaive at his throat. The energized tip hummed an inch from his skin. "How?" Before he could answer, a new voice entered the chaos. "He knows because he is a scholar, Captain, and you are pointing a spear at the wrong person." A hologram flickered to life in the center of the corridor. It was fragmented, static, slicing through the image. But it was unmistakably Empress Nyara. She was not in her royal armor, but in simple, flowing robes. She looked tired, but her eyes, even in hologram form, were sharp. She looked past Sarika, her gaze finding Rowan instantly. "Scholar," she said. Her voice was strained, but the familiar, dry sarcasm laced it. "You picked a terrible time for a pilgrimage." Rowan felt a genuine, tired smile touch his lips. "It seems the quiet seasons never last, Your Majesty." "I remember you from a quiet season," she murmured, a flicker of warmth in her gaze. "Aboard that refugee station, after the war, you were the only human who knew how to brew tea properly." Sarika Dax looked between the Empress's hologram and the soft-spoken human. Her expression was a mask of pure disbelief and fury. The Empress was engaging in fond reminiscence with a human, while they were under attack by her own Prime Regent. "Your Majesty," Sarika snapped, stepping between Rowan and the image. "Drome has activated the choir. He accuses you of treason." Warmth faded from Nyara's face. "Malachar Drome is a serpent who has poisoned the council. He seeks to sever our truce with the humans and install himself as a permanent regent." "He!" The hologram dissolved into static as Drome's voice boomed through the ship again. "Empress Nyara, you have 5 minutes to surrender yourself and the human agent, Rowan Hale. After that, I will increase the choir's amplitude by 50%. Your Huntresses will be the first to break." Sarika turned, her face a mask of cold fury, and stared at Rowan. The puzzle pieces snapped into place in her mind. The human, the Empress's familiarity, Drome's accusation, Crown's warning, "Your bones won't survive him." She had assumed him was the threat, but the Crown had been warning her about the man Drome was using as a pretext. No, that wasn't right. The warning felt larger. "You," Sarika breathed, all pretense of procedure gone. She grabbed the front of Rowan's tunic, slamming him against the bulkhead. The alloyed strength of her hand pinned him effortlessly. "You are the human element. You are the conspirator. What did you do?" Rowan kept his hands up, passive. "I brewed her tea, Captain, and I listened. Drome is terrified of the truce. He is terrified of her vision for a shared future. He is using me as an excuse to seize power. He's using you to kill us." "He's using the weapon he used to kill my people," Rowan shot back, his voice dropping the scholarly warmth and taking on the ice of his vengeance. "That frequency, I know it. Drome didn't invent it. He stole it, and he used it to massacre the Haven colony." Sarika stared at him, her mind clearly struggling to process the accusation. "The ship," Rowan pushed, forcing himself to stay calm. "The Crown is alive. She's biolocked. Drome can trap her, but he can't take control of her systems from the outside. Not without the Empress, or a medical override." Sarika's eyes narrowed. "The locks on this ship are biological," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Jareen keyed, but they have human interface overrides. For diplomatic staff." She shoved him away from the wall, her glaive now aimed at his back. "You are the medical staff," she snarled. "You are coming with me. We are going to the bridge, and you will open what I tell you to open." "And if I refuse?" Rowan asked, dusting off his tunic. "Then I will break your soft, human bones myself," Sarika said. "And then I will find a way to open it anyway. You are now an asset of the Order, Archivist. Do not make me designate you as an obstacle." Rowan Hale looked at the furious, powerful warrior threatening his life. He looked at the flashing red lights. He felt the sickening, skeletal vibration of Drome's weapon humming through the deck. His target was here. His vengeance was within reach, and to get to it, he had to play the part of the yielding, patient human medic. "After you, Captain," Rowan said, gesturing down the corridor. "I do hate to be an obstacle." The journey to the bridge was a claustrophobic nightmare of red flashing lights and the grinding, subcutaneous thrum of the bone choir. Rowan Hale walked with the precise, measured steps of a man who refused to hurry. A courtesy the Huntress pressing a glaive into his spine did not appreciate. "Move faster, human," Captain Sarika Dax growled. "If I move faster, Captain," Rowan replied, not looking back. "I might trip. You seem tense. Tripping me might be messy, and I am the only medic you have left." Sarika shoved him hard. "Your humor is unwelcome." "It's not humor," Rowan said, steadying himself. "It's a coping mechanism. You should try it." He was analyzing the vibration. It was not a simple sonic assault. It was a complex, multi-layered frequency, an inverse resonance cascade. He had studied the theory, but seeing it applied as a weapon was obscene. Drome was not simply trying to break their bones. He was trying to make them porous, to excite the metallic alloys within the Jareen skeletons until they lost cohesion and collapsed like wet sand. The rest of Sarika's Squad 9 warriors, now Maela left behind, formed a diamond perimeter, their movements economical and deadly. They passed a public concourse, a wide, open space that was usually filled with holographic displays of imperial art. Now, the massive screens were all lit with a single, static image, the golden, braided seal of the Prime Regent. Malachar Drome's voice, calm and deeply reasonable, was being broadcast on a loop, overriding the ship's internal systems. "A necessary and temporary quarantine," the voice oozed, resonating with paternalistic authority. The Empress, in her boundless compassion, has allowed human contagion to fester. This archivist, Rowan Hale, is merely the first symptom of a disease that threatens to rot the Empire from within. Humanity is the plague that fractured the spiral. The Golden Braid Council has authorized this purification to save the Empress from her own misguided sympathies. Rowan watched the Huntresses. He saw the flicker of doubt in their eyes as they heard the broadcast. The myth of humanity the plague was the bedrock of their culture, the justification for the war, the reason for their segregated existence. Sarika, to her credit, seemed unmoved. "Eyes forward, order," she snapped. "We do not listen to the words of a traitor. We listen to the Empress." But the seed was planted. They were here to save an Empress who, according to the highest authority in the land, was consorting with the enemy. And he was that enemy. They reached a primary bulkhead, a massive reinforced door that separated the civilian sectors from the command spine. A glowing, jade-green biometric panel pulsed beside it. "Open it, Archivist," Sarika commanded. Rowan looked at the panel. "It's keyed to Jareen physiology, Captain. It requires an alloyed bone resonance scan. I can't." "Do not lie to me," Sarika snarled, pressing her glaive so hard against his back he could feel the energy sing his tunic. "I reviewed your diplomatic profile when we boarded. This ship has diplomatic medical overrides on all primary locks. You have the clearance." Rowan let out a long, slow breath. Of course she did. She thinks of everything. He stepped up to the panel, placing his soft, human hand on the scanner. "This is a very bad idea, Captain. The bone choir is interfering with all biosystems. The ship is sick. Trying to force a lock now could short the entire junction." "Open the door," Rowan sighed. He navigated the submenus, the interface flickering under his touch. He was looking for the override command, but his eyes were scanning the diagnostic readings streaming in the background. The bone choir's signature was a jagged, ugly spike dominating the sensors. But beneath it, he saw it. Tucked away in a shielded partition of the Crown's biokernel, there was another signature. A tiny, elegant string of code pulsing in a complex, repeating pattern. It was a safe harmonic, a null spot in the resonance, designed to counteract the exact frequencies Drome was using. It was mathematically brilliant, subtle, and unmistakably human. He knew the signature. He knew the math. He had written it, years ago, during the refugee crisis. He had been aboard a floundering Jareen medical transport that had docked with the Nocturne Crown. He had been just a combat medic then, masquerading as an engineering tech. The Crown's gravity song had been failing, destabilized by a resonance weapon used in the final days of the war. Niara, then just a princess, had been there. She had secretly tasked him with helping her ship's engineers, who could not grasp the human-derived mathematics of the weapon. He had stabilized her core. And, In a moment of paranoia, he had left himself this back door, a harmonic safe word, buried in the ship's heart. "What is it?" Sarika demanded, noticing his hesitation. "You're stalling." "The system is fighting the signal," Rowan said, his mind racing. He had a weapon. He had a defense. But if he used it, if he revealed he could speak to the ship on that level, there's an echo, he finished lamely. He was about to trigger the simple override when the entire ship shuddered. Not from an impact, but from a vibration so deep it rattled his teeth. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into the pulsing red of the emergency strobes. The high note. The grinding thrum of the choir rose in pitch, becoming a piercing, agonizing shriek. "Ah!" one of the Huntresses yelled, stumbling. It was the young one, Maela, who had been left at the previous junction. She had evidently disobeyed Sarika and followed them, too proud or too scared to be left behind. She stumbled, her armored hand flailing out to steady herself against the bulkhead. Right next to the junction box Rowan was working on. The panel flashed bright white, shortening with a loud crack. The choir's frequency spiked, grounding itself through the panel and through Maela's arm. Maela screamed. It was not a warrior's cry. It was no cry of defiance. It was a thin, breathless sound of pure, agonizing pain. She collapsed to her knees, clutching her right arm to her chest. "Maela," Sarika roared, spinning, her glaive coming up. "Status report." Maela just gasped, her helmeted head bowed. "My hand, Captain, my hand, it's—" Rowan moved instantly, shoving past Sarika and dropping to his knees beside the shaking Huntress. The archivist evaporated, replaced by the medic. "Don't move her," he commanded. "Her armor is intact," another Huntress reported, scanning Maela. "There was no impact." "It wasn't an impact," Rowan said, his voice grim. He was already working on the emergency release of Maela's gauntlet. "It was the resonance. It spiked at that junction. Her armor is fine. Her bones are not." He looked at Maela's helmet, his voice softening. "Huntress, can you open the gauntlet?" Maela just let out a choked sob, shaking her head. "It won't respond. It hurts. God, it hurts." The Crown's voice filled the corridor, quieter this time, weaker, strained with her own effort. "The harmony is broken. The resonance is unstable. The note is too high. He is close." Sarika looked at the locked, smoking door, then at her wounded soldier. "Dax to Empress. We are stalled at Junction 7. Maela is down." The comms crackled. "The bridge is sealed. Sarika." Nyara's voice was tight with strain. "Drome has cut me off from the ship's core. Get that door open. Bring the archivist." "And Maela?" Sarika asked, her voice betraying a rare flicker of conflict. There was a pause. "Leave her. The mission comes first. That is the code of the Order." A cold, heavy silence filled the corridor. Sarika hesitated, her loyalty to her Empress warring with her duty to her soldier. "You leave her. She goes into shock," Rowan said quietly, not looking up from his work. "Or she tries to follow you and damages herself permanently. Give me 60 seconds. He popped the seal, and the gauntlet hissed open. "I can stabilize the hand. You two," he pointed at two other Huntresses. "Guard the junction, Captain. You watch our backs. We can't move forward with a compromised, terrified team. We move together, or we fall apart." Sarika visibly hated it. Hated the logic. Hated the delay. And hated, more than anything, taking strategic advice from a soft-boned human. But he was the only medic. 50 seconds. Archivist, she snarled. Then we leave her, with or without her hand. The other Huntresses formed a perimeter, their glaives humming. Rowan gently, carefully, began to slide the alloyed glove off Maela's arm. Maela whimpered as the glove came free. Rowan's breath hitched. He had seen catastrophic injuries. He had seen men vaporized and bodies exposed to vacuum. This was worse. Myla's hand was a ruin. The skin was swollen and a dark, mottled purple. But that was not the horrifying part. The structure was gone. Her fingers, her palm. Her wrist had collapsed. The alloyed bones, struck by that perfect, terrible frequency, had become brittle and shattered into dozens of fragments. "Gods," Myla whispered, staring at the wreckage of her own hand. "It's gone." "No, it's not," Rowan said, his voice firm but gentle. He pulled his medkit from his belt. "It's bad, but it's just bones. Bones mend." He activated an instant chemical heat pack, the plastic sleeve fogging and then becoming almost too hot to touch. He wrapped it gently around her wrist. "It's hot," she gasped, focusing on the new sensation. "Good. Keep your focus on the heat, not the other thing." He began to apply a stabilizing spray splint, a foam that would harden around the shattered limb. His movements were quick, efficient, and surprisingly delicate. Myla watched him, her fear-widened eyes tracking his movements. The propaganda was warring with reality. They said humans were monsters, savages who brought the spiral war. "We are." "Sometimes," Rowan replied, not looking up from the splint. "Just like everyone else." "But you," she whispered. "You're not. You're just a person." "Last I checked," Rowan said. He finished the splint, the foam hardening into a solid, white cast. "This will hold you. But you're done fighting for today." "I have failed the order," Myla said, shame replacing her pain. "You failed a physics test," Rowan countered, finally looking her in the eyes. He saw how young she was. 19, maybe 20. A child in armor. Drome cheated. He nodded to a thin silver line that traced her jaw, barely visible on her pale green skin. "You have a scar," he said. "Weapon." Myla touched it. "A reflex." "Training accident. A sparring glaive. My instructor said it would teach me to keep my guard up." Rowan nodded. He pulled up the sleeve of his own simple, gray tunic. On his forearm, a puckered, ugly burn scar, wide as his hand, dominated the pale skin. Myla stared at it. What is that?" "A reactor manifold," Rowan said. "On a refugee ship, the Jalous. It was leaking, and I was the only one small enough to get in and seal it." "Did you save the ship?" "I saved the ship," he said, pulling his sleeve down. "But I still hate reactors." He met her gaze. "We all have them. Huntress. The scars. They just prove we were there." "Time. Archivist." Sarika's voice cut through the moment. Rowan stood, helping Myla to her feet. "She's stable. She can walk. But she's a liability in a firefight. Her weapon hand is gone." Myla looked at Rowan, her expression stripped of its warrior pride, leaving behind a raw, confusing gratitude. Sarika looked at Myla, then Rowan. She made a decision. "Myla, you are with the Archivist. Your new duty is to keep him alive. If he dies, we lose our medic and our lockpick. Do not fail." Myla nodded, clutching her splinted hand. "Yes, Captain." Rowan returned to the smoking panel. It was dead. "You broke the door," Sarika stated. "I didn't," Rowan said. "The choir did. But—" He looked at the wreckage, then at the sealed door. He thought about the hidden harmonic. His harmonic. "I have an idea, but I need to get to the bridge." "The door is locked," Sarika said, losing patience. "Yes, but the wall is not," Rowan said, pointing to a ventilation duct cover. "It's a tight fit, but as I just mentioned, I'm small." Sarika looked at the duct, then at him, her expression one of profound disgust. "Lead the way," Archivist. The bridge of the Nocturne Crown was no place for screens and consoles. It was a massive, hollow cathedral, designed for the ship's song. In the very center, a crystalline structure hung from the ceiling, 30 feet tall, shaped like a massive, inverted tuning fork. It pulsed with a soft, gravitational hum, the quiet rhythm of the ship's heart. Empress Niara was standing at its base, alone. She was magnificent. She had shed her diplomatic robes and was now clad in her full, ancestral armor. It was not the matte black of the glaive, but a burnished, jade-green alloy, inlaid with bone-white gold, forged from the alloys of her ancestors. She turned as Sarika and her team emerged from the access tunnel, Rowan and Maela following close behind. Her eyes scanned her huntresses, noted Maela's injury, and then settled on Rowan. A tiny, weary smile touched her lips. "Rowan Hale," she said, her voice echoing in the chamber. "You always did have a sense of occasion. I see you survived the welcome party." "Barely, Niara," Rowan replied, brushing dust from his tunic. The casual use of her first name made the huntresses stiffen, their armor creaking. Sarika looked as if she might vaporize Rowan on the spot for the familiarity. "Your new Prime Regent has terrible taste in music." "Majesty!" Sarika snapped, stepping forward and kneeling. "The ship is locked down. Drome controls the beacons. He has taken the capital's defense grid offline. He aims the orbital cannons at Aurea Prime." "I am aware, Captain," Niara said, her voice cold and regal. Sarika rose, gesturing at Rowan. "This human, Drome names him a conspirator. The Crown warned us about him, and you speak to him as an equal." "He is an equal, Captain," Niara said, her gaze unwavering. "He and I survived the Jalus drift station together for 3 months after the war, when your precious council left us both for dead. He is not a conspirator. He is an old friend." Before Sarika could process the implications of that her Empress's life had been saved by, and shared with, a human, the main view screen flared to life. It was not a screen, but the entire, vast wall of polarized crystal that formed the front of the bridge, showing the purple-swathed planet below. Malachar Drome's face filled the void, 30 stories high. He was Jareen, but older, his skin like polished, cracked marble, his eyes cold and empty of all light. "My Empress," his voice boomed, shaking the very air. "Your rebellion is over. You have failed to surrender." "This is not a rebellion, Malachar," Niara shot back, her voice ringing with power. "It is a betrayal. Your betrayal. Turn off the choir. Surrender your forces." "The choir is merely a tuning fork, Majesty," Drome sneered. "A reminder of your fragility." His massive gaze slid, finding the tiny, insignificant figure of Rowan Hale. "Ah, the human element. The archivist. How fitting that your empire dies for a stray, a soft-boned pet." Rowan stepped forward, his voice quiet but carrying in the resonant chamber. "You know, for a genocidal tyrant, your rhetoric is remarkably dull. Drome, did you memorize that? Or is human plague the only insult you know?" Drome's eye twitched, the only sign of his fury. Sarika gasped at the sheer audacity of the insult. "Your bravado is useless, human," Drome said. "You are soft bones. You will be the first to die when I increase the amplitude. But I am offering one final act of clemency." He raised a hand, and the image shifted. It now showed the orbiting defense cannons, all turned inward, aimed at the beautiful, floating capital city of Aurea Prime. "Surrender the core key of the Nocturne Crown," Drome commanded, "and surrender yourself, Majesty, to the justice of the Council. Do this, and I will spare the capital. You have 10 minutes. After that, I will fire." The screen went dark, leaving them in the pulsing red emergency light of the bridge. "The core key," Sarika whispered, horrified. "He wants to take the crown herself." "The core key," Niara said, her voice heavy, "is not an object, Captain. It is bound to my life signs. It is my heart, my mind, and my soul, linked to the ship. He is asking for my execution." The bridge was silent, save for the low, grinding thrum of the bone choir. The threat was absolute. The ship was trapped. The city was hostage. The Empress must die. Rowan walked away from the group. He moved toward the massive, pulsing crystal in the center of the room, the crown's heart, the tuning fork. He could feel it. Two distinct songs, warring for dominance. One was the ship the deep, ancient, complex gravity song that bent space and time. It felt like a cello quartet, vast and slow and powerful. The other was Drome's weapon, the high, grating, invasive shriek of the bone choir. A single, mad violin note, trying to shatter the ship's harmony. Rowan closed his eyes. The Huntresses saw a human medic, out of his depth, probably praying to his forgotten, soft-boned gods. But Rowan Hale was not praying. He was listening. He heard space music. He always had. It was his gift, his curse. He was a graviton cantor, a man who could hear the song of gravity itself. And Drome, he realized, was singing terribly, terribly out of tune. Rowan reached out and placed one soft, unarmored human hand on the vibrating crystal altar. He felt the crown's pain. He felt her fighting back, trying to protect her crew. He felt the safe harmonic he had hidden in her kernel all those years ago, vibrating like a single, pure flute note, trying to be heard above the deafening noise. He isolated the frequency. He matched his breathing to it. A very faint, very cold smile touched Rowan Hale's lips. He knew Drome's weapon was a signature. He just realized it was not just a signature. It was a composition, and he knew exactly how to rewrite it. The 10-minute deadline was a screaming silence in the background, a metronome of dread. As Drome's face vanished from the main view wall, replaced by the deep purple of the captive planet, Sarika Dax sprang into action. "Niara, Majesty, the key. We cannot give it to him, but the capital." "He will fire anyway, Captain," Niara said, her voice a razor. "Malachar does not offer clemency. He offers only the illusion of choice." She turned, her armored gaze sweeping her Huntresses. "He has locked us out. He controls the choir, but he does not control the crown's heart. Not yet. We must get to engineering. If we can manually decouple the resonance amplifiers from the gravity drive, we can deafen the ship." "The path is locked, Majesty," Sarika said. "Drome has sealed the command spine." Rowan, who had been studying a secondary console, spoke without looking up. "Not entirely. He's locked the main arteries, but the old maintenance junction, near the cryo bay, is still active. It's a bio-lock." All eyes turned to him. "How do you know that?" Sarika demanded. "Because I'm an archivist," Rowan said, his voice flat. "I read the schematics. It's my job." Before Sarika could argue, Drome's voice returned. This time, not as a direct hail, but as a system-wide broadcast. The view wall lit up again, not with his face, but with grainy, corrupted surveillance footage. It showed Niara, or a very convincing likeness, standing in a dark cargo bay. She was speaking to a human, but it was not Rowan. This human was scarred, wearing the tattered remains of a coalition military uniform. "The coalition agrees," the tinny audio recording said, the voice clearly Niara's. "The alloyed bone must be neutralized. The Empire is a relic. We will build a new." The feed dissolved into static. The bridge was stone silent. "A fake," Niara breathed, her voice shaking with rage. A clumsy, insulting fake. He dares. But the Huntresses did not see a fake. They saw their Empress, their living symbol, conspiring with their most hated enemy. They saw the human plague she was allegedly embracing. Maella, standing near the back, clutching her splinted arm, stared at the static screen. Her young face, which had held gratitude for Rowan just moments before, now hardened with suspicion. The medic who had saved her hand was still one of the monsters who had brought the spiral war. It's a lie, Sarika said, her voice low. But the word lie hung in the air, lacking the iron certainty it usually held. The council had sanctioned Drome. The broadcast was clear. As if sensing the shift in morale, the ship herself seemed to falter. The grinding thrum of the bone choir remained, but a new sound joined it. A slow, heavy thump. A pause. A second thump. It was the crown, her internal system struggling against the invasive frequency. The ambient, soft green lights in the corridor junctions, the ones that marked safe passage, began to pulse in the same rhythm. 1, 2, 1, 2. It was the sound of a failing, massive heart. Crown's voice whispered from the console, clipped and flat. Her priestly harmonies were gone. Core integrity failing. Interference patterns detected in primary systems. He is too loud. He is breaking the song. Niara touched the central crystal. Hold on, old friend. Just hold on. She turned to Sarika. Get us to engineering. Now. Sarika nodded, her faith, however shaken, landing on her Empress. Order form on me. Archivist, Maella, you are in the center. Move. The journey through the command spine was tense. The ship felt different. She felt ill. The bulkheads groaned, and with every thump-thump of the failing heart, the bone choir seemed to bite deeper, a physical ache in the jaw. They reached the maintenance junction. It was an older part of the ship, the walls a dull, unpolished alloy. The biolock panel was dark. Drome must have cut the power, Sarika said, frustration radiating from her. No, Rowan said, stepping forward. It's on a separate, shielded circuit. It's just sleeping. He placed his hand on the panel. It flickered to life, bathing his face in green light. Sarika watched him, her suspicion now a palpable force. The broadcast, Drome said, neutralize the alloyed bone. You are a medic. You understand biology. You understand harmonics. Are you the one who taught her how? I taught her how to brew tea, Captain, Rowan said, his eyes on the interface. This is a standard diplomatic lock. It just needs a code. Then open it. No tricks. Human. My patience is gone. Rowan's fingers moved over the holographic display. He felt the grinding, chaotic thrum of the choir. Even here. It was interfering with the panel's sensors, making them sluggish. But he also felt his own, hidden code. The safe harmonic, still pulsing faintly, like a candle in a hurricane. He had a choice. He could open the lock, or Drome is using a centralized amplifier network, he thought, his mind racing. He is pushing the choir through the ship's own power grid. This junction controls the power relay for the entire starboard wing. He could open the door, or he could cut the choir to 30% of the ship. He input the access codes, but in the final string, his finger slipped, tapping a secondary command for a full diagnostic feedback loop. The panel flashed red, the door hissed open, and alarms blared from Sarika's wristcom. Captain, one of her Huntresses called from the rear guard. The choir signal, it just dropped. The vibration, it's gone from the starboard side? Sarika froze. She looked at the open door. She looked at the alarm readout on her comm. Then she looked at Rowan. Her eyes narrowed to slits. A slight error. Archivist, she whispered, her voice deadly. Rowan offered a small, helpless shrug. It's a very stressful environment. Captain. The panel was sticky. Fingers slip. Sarika's lips peeled back in a predatory snarl. She knew, with absolute certainty, that this soft, quiet human was no mere medic. He was a saboteur. But, for the moment, he was her saboteur. "Through the door," she commanded. "I will deal with you later. Archivist." The corridor on the other side was dark. The 1-2 pulse of the ambient lights was the only illumination, casting long, rhythmic shadows. The air was heavy, the oppressive thrum of the bone choir noticeably absent. The silence was, somehow, even more terrifying. "It's a trap," Rowan murmured, scanning the darkness. "The silence is the trap," Sarika agreed. "He wanted us here. He deafened this wing to lure us in." "Or," Rowan countered, "he didn't deafen it. We did. And he is adapting." The first shot was no laser. It was not a bullet. It was a dull thump from the darkness ahead, and a shimmering, kinetic pulse of energy slammed into the Huntress at point. The warrior's armor held. The pulse dissipated harmlessly, but the Huntress cried out, a sharp, choked sound, and stumbled. "My leg," she gasped. "I can't feel my leg." "Vibration rounds," Sarika roared, igniting her glaive. "They're firing resonance slugs, form shields, hounds of glass, show yourselves, from hatches in the ceiling and alcoves in the walls." Figures dropped into the corridor. They were not Jareen. They were encased in full, mirrored environmental suits, their faces hidden behind reflective black visors. They carried heavy, blunt-nosed launchers, the hounds of glass, Drome's personal spec ops. They opened fire. The hallway filled with percussive, thumping beats. Another Huntress was hit. She did not fall, but her arm went limp, her glaive clattering to the deck as her alloyed bones resonated with the impact. Instantly paralyzed. "They're not trying to penetrate," Sarika yelled, her team forming a wall. "They're shaking us apart. Return fire." The Huntresses fired their sidearms, but the laser bolts sparked harmlessly off the mirrored armor. "They're playing in the corridor," Rowan said, his voice urgent. He had pulled Mila behind a support pillar. He could feel the impacts, feel the resonance. The hounds, their footsteps, their shots. It's all in rhythm. They've found the corridor's natural frequency. They are using the ship against us. "What nonsense are you speaking? Human!" Sarika yelled, deflecting a pulse with her glaive. "Your steps!" Rowan shouted, exiting behind the pillar. "You're matching their frequency. You're marching. Every step you take in rhythm with them amplifies their weapon. You have to break the song. We are warriors, we move as one. Then you will fall as one," Rowan yelled. "Breathe out on the left foot, in on the right. Step between the thumps. Feel the ship's heartbeat, the 1-2 pulse, and step on the offbeat. Become dissonant." To Sarika, it was the madness of a terrified human. But her warriors were falling apart without being touched. She looked at her faltering line. She looked at the advancing, implacable mirrored hounds. "Order," she roared. "Listen to the human break rhythm. Dance." It was alien to them. Their entire lives were discipline, rhythm, and unity. But they were Huntresses. They were trained to adapt. The Huntresses broke their line. Their movements became awkward, syncopated, fluid. A warrior would step, pause, lunge, then roll, deliberately out of sync with her sisters. The hounds, who had been relying on a predictable, unified wall of bone alloy to amplify their weapons, suddenly found their vibration rounds striking single, isolated targets. The pulses splashed against the armor, still painful, but no longer debilitating. The Huntresses closed the distance. The corridor, which had been their resonance chamber tomb, became a slaughterhouse. The hounds of glass, so effective at a distance, were no match for the physical, alloyed bone fury of the Order of the Glaive at close range. Rowan pulled Mela deeper into the shadows as the fight moved past them. He watched, his medic's mind cataloging the brutal efficiency of the Huntresses. But his eyes were drawn to the fallen. He moved to the first Huntress who had been hit, the one who could not feel her leg. As he knelt, his gaze fell on one of the dead hounds. The warrior's mirrored suit had been breached by a glaive. The helmet cracked open. The soldier inside was not Jareen. Rowan felt his blood run cold. He moved closer, his heart pounding against his ribs, a sick, hollow dread rising in his throat. The soldier was human. He stared at the face. A young man, gaunt and pale. But it was not the face that held his attention. Tucked inside the collar of the Spec Ops suit, hanging from a simple chain, was a small, fire-blackened metal disc. A crest. Rowan knew that crest. It was the sigil of the Haven colony. The sigil of his home. He stumbled back, his breath catching. His mind, which had been so clear, so focused on harmonics and strategy, suddenly shattered. Drome had not just murdered his colony. He had enslaved the survivors. He had taken the last, broken remnants of Haven, armed them, encased them in mirrored tombs, and sent them to die fighting for the very monster who had destroyed their world. This was a level of cruelty, a depth of desecration Rowan had never imagined. The chain around the dead soldier's neck was a mockery, a slave brand, disguised as a memory. Archivist, Sarika's voice, snapped him back. The fight was over. The corridor was littered with the bodies of the hounds. The way is clear. Move. Rowan stood, his movements numb. The fire of his vengeance, which had been a cold, precise point of light, now exploded into a white-hot, consuming nova. This was not about killing Malachar Drome anymore. This was about salting the earth of his entire, rotten system. He looked at Sarika, at the Huntresses, at the ship's 1-2 pulsing lights. "He used my people," Rowan whispered, his voice shaking with a cold rage Sarika had never heard. "He used them as weapons." "What?" Rowan just shook his head, the mask of the patient medic falling back into place, but his eyes were dead. "Nothing, Captain. Let's get to engineering." The route to engineering was blocked by the wreckage of the fight. Sarika had to reroute them again, this time through the Star Coffin Bay. It was a vast, cold chamber, the walls lined with thousands of cryopods, each holding a Jareen warrior who had fallen in deep space, awaiting their return to the home soil. It was a place of honor, deep, mournful silence. Now. The silence was punctuated by the ship's heartbeat, the 1-2, thump-thump. The status light on every single cryopod was pulsing in time with it. "Secure the perimeter," Sarika ordered, her voice hushed in the tomb-like expanse. 2 minutes to reorient. It was the first moment of true quiet they had known. Rowan moved to Mila, checking the splint on her shattered hand. The Huntress just stared at him, her suspicion forgotten, replaced by a new, confusing awe. Niara approached him, moving silently in her ancestral armor. She stood beside him, her gaze on the rows of the dead. "You are quiet, Rowan," she said, her voice soft. "You look older than I remember from the Jalu station." "War ages everyone, Niara," he replied, not looking at her. "Even the ones who dream of it ending." "Do you still dream of it?" she asked. "A galaxy with no more war. Every night." He finally met her eyes, and she saw the inferno burning behind his calm expression. "But Drome makes that dream impossible. He is not just a traitor, Niara. He is a monster." He wanted to tell her. He wanted to show her the crest he had taken from the dead hound. But not now. Not here. She stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking to inches. The tension of the last hour, the shared memories of starvation and survival on the drift station, The absolute impossibility of their situation all converged. He kissed her. It was not the kiss of a scholar for his Empress. It was the desperate, hopeless kiss of a dying man. It was brief, hard, and tasted of ozone and regret. He pulled away first, breathing heavily. He looked at her, at the magnificent, jade-green armor, at the crown-like helmet she carried at her hip. A flicker of the old, self-deprecating humor returned to his eyes. "Well," he breathed, "that was a spectacularly bad idea. Kissing the Empress while her ship is sinking, surrounded by her deadliest warriors. That's probably treason." A small, sad smile touched Nyara's lips. "Technically, I am the one accused of treason, Rowan. So, perhaps it cancels out." A new voice, weak and thin, whispered from the bay's internal comms. It was Crown. "The core is failing," the AI's flat voice stated. "The harmonics are unstable. The safe note is degrading. The one someone wrote in the kernel." Nyara's smile vanished. She stared at Rowan, her gaze suddenly, piercingly sharp. "The safe note," she said, her voice dropping. "The engineers on the Jalis drift station could not fix the gravity song. They said it stabilized itself. They called it a ghost in the code." Rowan turned away, busying himself with the seals on his medkit. He broke eye contact. "Ghosts. Majesty. In a sophisticated AI, highly unlikely. We should keep moving. Captain Sarika looks like she is about to test her glaive on the nearest bulkhead." He started to walk away, but Nyara's voice, cold and dawning with a terrible suspicion, stopped him. "You, Rowan. It was you. You were not just a medic on that station. You were the one who saved my ship." Rowan paused, his back to her. "I sealed a reactor manifold. Nyara. I told you. I have the scar to prove it." "You lied to me," she whispered. Rowan turned, his face unreadable. "I kept a secret, Majesty, just as you kept yours. Now, engineering awaits." The path to engineering had been a ruin. Drome's hounds had collapsed the main conduit, forcing them into a tactical retreat. They were back on the bridge, the one place Drome seemed content to let them fester, trapped like insects in amber. The 10-minute deadline had shrunk to 3. The thump-thump of the Crown's failing heart was louder here, the central crystal altar pulsing a sickly, discordant red. "It was a trap," Sarika stated, her voice flat, slamming her fist against a console. "He funneled us away from here, then back. He is playing with us." Nyara ignored her, her gaze locked on Rowan. She had not looked away from him since the star Coffin Bay. "You didn't answer me. Rowan, you saved this ship, all those years ago. You are not an archivist." "Does it matter what I am?" Rowan said, his back to her, watching the main view wall, which showed only the silent, waiting cannons. "We have less than 3 minutes before Drome tires of this game and burns the capital." "It matters," Sarika snapped, rounding on him. "It means you have been lying since you set foot on this vessel. It means you are a variable we did not account for." Before Rowan could answer, the view wall exploded with light. It was not Drome's face this time. It was a war avatar. A towering, 30-story construct of black and gold alloy, faceted like an obsidian knife. It carried no features, only a single, pulsing red sensor. Drome's voice boomed from the avatar, synthesized and metallic, stripped of all humanity. "Your time has expired, Nyara. You have failed to choose. Therefore, I will choose for you." "The capital is innocent, Malachar," Nyara shouted, stepping toward the wall. "This is between us. Innocence is a luxury the Empire can no longer afford," the Avatar said. "You will surrender the core key, or I will cleanse the city. This is the final offer. The cannons will fire in 1 minute. The avatar's massive, simulated head swiveled. The red sensor eye focused, zooming in on the insignificant human figure standing by the console. And you, the human element, the catalyst. Rowan felt the pressure of that gaze, a cold, analytical weight. I confess, I underestimated you, Drome's voice continued. My hounds report anomalies, resistance. You are more than a simple medic. So I reviewed the old Coalition databases, the ones we captured at Haven. Rowan felt his blood freeze. He had been so careful, for so long. Rowan Hale is an adequate cover, Drome sneered. A quiet, dusty name. But your real name is Ryan Valerius, former Coalition Graviton Cantor, Class 1, wanted for the unauthorized use of resonance weapons, the man who collapsed the Xylos corridor. Silence. Absolute. Crushing silence on the bridge. Maela gasped, her good hand flying to her mouth. The other Huntresses took an involuntary, synchronized step away from him. Rowan Ryan closed his eyes. The secret he had buried for a decade, the identity he had shed with the blood of his colony, was now naked in the air, spoken by the very man he had come to kill. Sarika Dax moved like a viper. She crossed the bridge in 2 strides. The butt of her glaive slammed into Rowan's stomach, doubling him over with a sickening thud. Before he could recover, she had his arms wrenched behind his back, binding them with a high tensile energy cuff from her belt. "A cantor!" she hissed, her voice vibrating with a sudden, profound hatred that eclipsed even her anger at Drome. "A gravity singer. The plague that started the spiral war. You are not a medic. You are a weapon." She shoved him to his knees in the center of the bridge. "Majesty," Sarika barked, turning to Niara. "This changes everything. He is not a diplomat. He is a wanted fugitive, a spy. Drome is right. This is a human conspiracy. He has been manipulating you. He has compromised the crown." Niara looked at Rowan, who was kneeling, fighting for breath, his face pale. Her expression was torn, a canvas of betrayal and dawning horror. "Rowan Ryan, is this true?" "My name is Rowan Hale," he gasped, the lie tasting like ash. "The Coalition is dead. I am just a medic. I swear." "Liar," Sarika placed the energized tip of her glaive against his throat. The heat and hum made his skin crawl. "You slipped at the junction. You cut the choir. You danced us through the Hound's attack. You have been playing us all." "Sarika, stop," Niara commanded, but her voice wavered. The law was absolute. Harboring a Class 1 cantor was an act of war. "He is the him," Sarika suddenly roared, her eyes wide with horrified understanding. "Crown's warning, your bones won't survive him." She was warning us about him, a cantor. "He could shatter our bones with a single thought. He is not the only one." Drome's avatar boomed, seeming almost amused. "My hounds are also adept at the song, and they are no longer waiting for permission. Attack." The ship screamed. It was not the grinding thrum from before. This was a physical assault. Hatches blew open on the bridge itself, and hounds of glass, dozens of them, poured in, firing their vibration launchers. Simultaneously, the bone choir spiked. The frequency rose past agonizing, into a realm of pure, physical dissolution. Crack one of the Huntresses by the door shrieked a sound identical to Maela's, and collapsed. Her leg armor was intact, but the alloyed bone inside had snapped. "Amplitude at maximum," another Huntress yelled, stumbling, her visor cracking from the sheer sonic pressure. "We can't resonance. It's liquefying us." "Fight!" Sarika roared, but she too was staggering. One hand pressed to her helmet as if to hold her skull together, her glaive wavering. Crown's voice screamed from the central altar, no longer a chorus, but a single, terrified shriek of static and pain. The song is broken. He is here, your bones will not survive him. The prophecy had come true. The warning had been delivered. Niara looked at her falling huntresses, writhing on the deck in their perfect, useless armor. She looked at the city on the view wall, where Drome's cannons were now glowing, fully charged to fire. She looked at Rowan, bound and kneeling, the enemy of her people, the man she had kissed. She made her choice. She stumbled toward the central crystal, her ancestral armor groaning under the resonance, and slammed her hand onto it. Malachar, stop, I surrender, I yield the core key, spare the city. Spare my crew. Niara, no, Rowan yelled, straining against his bonds. A wise choice, Majesty. Drome's avatar said. The cannons will stand down. Initiate the transfer protocol. Don't do it, Rowan roared. He strained against the energy cuffs, the high-frequency hum biting into his skin. He won't stop. He'll kill you and the city. I have no choice. Rian, she cried, tears streaming down her face, cutting paths through the grime. It is my duty. I cannot let my people burn. No. Rowan's voice dropped. The panic was gone. It was replaced by a terrifying, cold calm. It is not. He stopped fighting the cuffs. He stopped fighting Sarika, Drome, and the hounds. He listened. He heard the thumping vibration rounds of the hounds cutting through the air. He heard the screaming, chaotic frequency of the bone choir. He heard the crown's 1-2 heartbeat, faint and dying. He heard the high-pitched whine of the energy cuffs binding his wrists. He found the frequency. Rowan Hale, Ryan Valerius opened his mouth and sang. It was not a word. It was not a sound any of them had ever heard. It was a single, pure, impossible note that seemed to come from the bulkheads themselves, from the air, from the stars. The energy cuffs on his wrists shattered, their power source instantly inverted, the locking mechanism melting into slag. He surged to his feet. Sarika spun, glaive raised, but stopped, her jaw dropping. Rowan was shimmering. A faint, blue-white aura of gravitic energy was rolling off his skin. The microcrystals embedded in his human bones, a genetic quirk, a mutation. The source of his power were resonating, energized by his own voice. Get down. He yelled at Niara. A vibration round, fired by a hound, was streaking toward Niara's back as she stood, frozen, at the altar. Rowan didn't move to intercept it. He sang a second note, a sharp, dissonant harmony to the first. The air bent. The vibration round did not stop. It phased. The pulse of killing energy warped, its frequency instantly inverted, and it splashed harmlessly against the bulkhead. Its killing tune now, just a dull, wet thud. Another huntress, the one whose spine had been struck, was collapsing, her body arching in a final, agonizing spasm. Rowan saw it. He turned, his hand outstretched, and sang again, a complex, 5-note chord that was both beautiful and terrible. The huntress stopped falling. She floated for a bare second, her body enveloped in that same blue aura. The shattering resonance in her spine stopped, its frequency matched, and neutralized by Rowan's song. He gently lowered her to the deck, her bones still intact. What are you? Sarika whispered. Her glaive lowered, her warrior's mind completely unable to process what she was seeing. The hounds on the bridge, seeing their weapons useless, seeing this soft-boned human bend physics, hesitated. He's a cantor, Niara breathed, her hand frozen over the crystal altar. He is singing with the ship. Louder, Rowan gasped, the effort already costing him. A trickle of blood ran from his nose. He's not just using the choir. He's using the ship's own gravity field against her. He's created a feedback loop. Rowan turned to the central crystal, the heart of the crown. He placed both hands on it. He closed his eyes. You want a feedback loop, Drome, he whispered. He listened to the hound's gun song. He found their frequency. And then, using the crown as his amplifier, he pushed. He sang the inverse. The effect was instantaneous. The hound's weapons, designed to send resonance out, suddenly had their own frequency fed back to them, amplified 1,000 times. The mirrored armor of the hounds did not shatter. It imploded. The resonance, with nowhere to go, turned inward. The suits and the bodies within them were crushed, their weapons dissolving into molten slag. The bridge was suddenly, shockingly silent, save for the gasping of the Huntresses and the thump-thump of the failing ship. On the view wall, Drome's war avatar pulsed with a dark, cold rage. So, the fugitive reveals himself. You are powerful, Cantor. More powerful than the files suggested. But you are one, soft-boned man, and I have more than acquire. The avatar raised its hand. The view shifted, zooming out, past the ship, past the capital. It focused on a point in high orbit, a massive, skeletal structure, a web of satellites and amplifiers, pulsed with a new, terrifying energy. It dwarfed the Nocturne crown. You broke my choir, Drome's voice sneered. So I will use the pillar. The ultra-resonance pillar. It was not designed to break bones, Cantor. It was designed to break ships, to break continents. The new threat was absolute. The pillar began to glow, feeding a new, low-frequency thrum into the crown that made the deck beneath them physically roll, like the deck of a ship on a storm-tossed sea. Nyara looked at the pillar. She looked at Rowan, who was now leaning heavily on the altar, blood dripping from his nose and ears. He had saved them, but he was dying. It's too much, Ryan, she whispered, stepping toward him. You can't fight that. I must still surrender. It is the only way. Rowan laughed, a wet, choking sound. He wiped the blood from his mouth with the back of his hand. You surrender now, Nyara. And who will be left to keep the promise? Who will remember the dead at Haven? He looked at her, his eyes blazing with a defiant, exhausted fire. And besides, who is going to scold me properly for kissing you if you're dead? The Huntresses, even Sarika, stared, facing annihilation. The human was joking. Nyara's heart ached. This is not a joke, Ryan. It's not, he agreed. He pushed himself upright, his body shaking with the strain. He was pale, soaked in sweat, but resolute. It's a choice, and I am not letting that monster win. He turned to Sarika. His voice was no longer the soft archivist. It was the command of a Class 1 Cantor. Captain, your Empress is beaten, your ship is dying, and your enemy is about to wipe this planet clean. I am the only weapon you have left. Sarika looked at this impossible human, this enemy of her people, this fugitive who had just saved her and her Empress. What do you need? She asked, her voice quiet. Rowan Hale returned to the great crystal altar, the heart of the Nocturne crown. I need you to give me the ship, he said. All of it. Unslave the gravity field controls from the Empress's biolock and give them to me. Right now. Sarika looked at Nyara, who nodded, her eyes full of a terrifying, new hope. Sarika moved to the command console. It will kill you, human, she said, her hands flying over the controls. The feedback no one can channel that much. I'm already dead, Captain, Rowan said, placing his hands on the crystal. The only question is whether I die as an archivist or as a Cantor. He took a deep breath, the blue aura around him beginning to burn bright. Do it. Sarika hit the switch. May the ancestors forgive me. Control is yours. Human. Rowan felt the crown's full, unbridled power slam into his consciousness. The song of the ship, the gravity of a dreadnought, the weight of a dying star, was now his to command. He opened his mouth, ready to truly sing. The moment Sarika ceded control, the nocturne crown became Rowan Hale. It was not a sensation he could have described. It was an instantaneous expansion of his senses. He was no longer a man standing on a bridge. He was the bridge. He was the bulkheads, the failing engines, the kilometers of wiring, the pressurized air, and the aching, wounded heart of the ship itself. The central crystal altar beneath his hands was no longer a console. It was his nervous system. The vibrations of the ship were his own pulse. He felt the crown's ancient, deep gravity song. The cello quartet he had heard before, now thrumming directly in his mind, and warring against it. He felt Drome's two weapons, the high, grating shriek of the bone choir, and the deep, seismic rumble of the ultra-resonance pillar. It was too much, a cacophony designed to tear a mind apart, and beneath it all, the ship's own faltering heartbeat, the thump-thump of the emergency lights. No, he thought. My heartbeat. Rowan took a breath, and the ship breathed with him. The failing 1-2 pulse of the ambient lights steadied. It slowed, matching the rhythm of his own human heart. The crown, the ancient, living dreadnought, synchronized herself to the soft-boned fugitive at her core. The ship had become a giant, resonant harp, and he was the cantor. "He's the lights," Maella whispered, her good hand gripping her splintered arm. "He's stabilizing the ship's heart." "He is the ship's heart," Nyara breathed, watching the blue-white gravitic aura envelop Rowan, making him shimmer like a phantom at the altar. "First," Rowan whispered, his voice sounding distant, amplified by the bridge comms. "We changed the tune." He ignored the pillar. That was the cannon. He first had to silence the screaming in his head, the bone choir. It was a complex, multi-layered broadcast, a carrier wave of hate. Drome was using it to disable the loyalist ships and keep the Huntresses' bones on the verge of shattering. Rowan listened to it. He found the mathematical root of the composition. It was crude, for all its power. Brute force. He did not block it. He did not counter it. He edited it. He raised one hand from the altar, his fingers splayed, and sang a single, perfect note of absolute silence. He composed a null point, a mathematical void, and inserted it directly into the core of Drome's broadcast. On the bridge, the effect was instantaneous. The high-pitched, grinding shriek that had been tearing at their skulls for an hour simply stopped. The pressure vanished. Sarika let out a sharp, involuntary gasp. The Huntresses on the floor, who had been writhing in agony, went still, their armor no longer a torture chamber. On the view wall, the image of Drome's fleet flickered. The ships that had been holding a tight, menacing blockade suddenly wavered, their weapon systems, all tied to the choir's frequency, flashing with error messages. The war avatar of Malachar Drome turned its single red eye back to the crown. "What did you do, Cantor?" Drome's synthesized voice was no longer amused. It was laced with cold fury. Rowan leaned heavily on the altar. The single note had cost him. Blood was already tracing a line from his nose. "I edited your composition, Malachar," Rowan's voice whispered from the ship's speakers. "It was derivative. All noise, no subtlety. Your song is over. You think silencing my choir wins this. I am the purification. Cantor. I am the strong hand this empire has lacked, the one willing to cut away the human stain that you represent." The avatar loomed, its voice rising to a roar. "You speak of songs. You are a dying note, a biological contamination, a failed species." "A failed species," Rowan repeated. He looked at Nyara, then Sarika. He was an archivist. His power was not just physics. It was a memory. "You're broadcasting, Malachar," Rowan said, his voice quiet. "To the whole fleet, to the capital. You want them to see your strength. You want them to see the human stain. They will see me burn you from the stars." "Then let them see this first," Rowan said. He did not attack. He did not sing. He opened a file. He pushed a simple, corrupted audio log from the Haven Colony database, his last, secret archive, and broadcast it over Drome's own network, overwriting the Avatar's audio. The bridge, the fleet, the capital world below, they all heard it. It was not a soldier. It was not a politician. It was a child, a little girl, her voice thin and reedy over the static. "I can't find my doll, Mommy, and my hand feels funny. It feels like sand, Mommy." A pause. The child's voice rose in panic. "Mommy, why are you crying? The sound, please. Make the sound stop, it hurts." The log dissolved into a single, high-pitched shriek, the perfect, horrifying recording of the bone choir, at maximum amplitude, and then silence. The bridge was a tomb. Sarika Dax, the iron-willed captain of the glaive, slowly sank to one knee, her head bowed. Myla was openly weeping, her good hand covering her mouth. The other huntresses were frozen, the sound of that child's voice shattering a lifetime of propaganda. This was not the human plague. This was not an enemy. This was a child, being unmade in her own home. Rowan Hale, his face a mask of cold, righteous fury, stared at the Avatar. "That is your purification, Malakar." Rowan's voice echoed, cold as the void. "That is the stain you wiped out. Their bones were not alloy. They were soft, like mine. And you turned them to dust. You are not a regent. You are not a savior. You are a butcher." Drome's avatar was rigid. For a moment, the broadcast was silent. "Memory is weakness," Drome roared, the voice distorting with pure, animalistic rage. "Ideals are for the dead. Physics is the only law." The avatar pointed. "You want to hear the dead? Cantor. Then join them. Ultra resonance, pillar fire." The skeletal structure in high orbit, the pillar, flashed with a catastrophic discharge of energy. A wave of pure, kinetic force, a gravitational tide, slammed into the nocturne crown. The bridge screamed. The deck plates bent, groaning, threatening to tear apart. The ship was not being sung to. It was being beaten, struck by a hammer the size of a moon. "He's tearing the ship apart," Sarika yelled, her hands on the deck to keep from being thrown. Rowan felt the impact in his bones. He knew, with Cantor's certainty, that he could not sing against it. The pillar was too strong, too loud, too big. "You can't fight that!" Nyara cried, grabbing a stanchion. "No!" Rowan gasped, his body shaking, blood now flowing freely. "I can't fight it. He's right. Physics is the law." He looked at the view wall, at the pillar, at Drome's fleet, which was now moving to reform between the pillar and the crown. "But physics," Rowan smiled, a terrifying, bloody grin, "is my song." "Sarika," Nyara, hold on. "Hold on to what?" Sarika roared. "Anything." Rowan stopped fighting the pillar's wave. He let the resonance flow through him, into the crown's gravity drive. He gathered the tension, the massive building potential energy, and then he released it. He sang one, perfect, impossible note. The stars on the view wall did not streak. They vanished. The nocturne crown did not jump to hyperspace. She folded space, a gravitic shift, an instantaneous, brutal lurch that threw everyone on the bridge to the deck. One moment, they were in low orbit, targets. The next, the void snapped back, and they were in high orbit, behind Drome's fleet. The ultra-resonance pillar was no longer a distant threat. It was right beside them, and Drome's fleet was now trapped between the nocturne crown and the pillar itself. "What did you do?" Sarika gasped, pulling herself up. Drome's voice, confused, sputtered. "Where tactics? How did you—" You wanted to use resonance, Malachar. Rowan's voice boomed, triumphant and terrible, amplified by the ship. You wanted to hit something here. Let me help you. He channeled all his power, all his rage, all his grief, into the gravity drive. He did not sing to the pillar. He sang to the crown, and he shoved. He used the entire, moon-sized dreadnought as a gravitational ram, pushing his shield against the pillar, which in turn was shoved into Drome's unsuspecting, trapped fleet. The pillar, a delicate, skeletal web of amplifiers, was not designed for physical impact. It shattered, its own resonance field collapsing inward. It became a kinetic bomb. The view wall erupted in white light as the pillar, Drome's flagship, and a dozen surrounding cruisers all vaporized in a single, silent, expanding bubble of plasma and shattered metal. The shockwave hit the crown, and Rowan screamed. The victory, the sheer physical impossibility of the act, broke him. He felt it, not a snap, but a shattering. The microcrystalline lattice in his own bones, the source of his power, cracked like glass struck by a hammer. The blue aura around him vanished. His strength evaporated. He slumped over the hard altar, his hands sliding from the crystal, leaving bloody smears. He was blind. He was deaf. The only sound was a high-pitched whine in his skull. Ryan. He heard Niara's voice, not with his ears, but in his mind. The ship. She was yelling his name. Crown the AI's voice was back, faint, terrified. Cantor Ryan, you are breaking. The Matrix is failing. Your bones are dust. The song is too loud. It is killing you. Please stop. No, Rowan whispered, his voice barely a rasp. He tried to reach for the altar again, but his arms would not obey. He was dying. He had won. But he was dying. He felt hands on him. Strong, alloyed hands. Niara. She was trying to pull him from the altar, to save him. No, let me finish, he gasped. You are finished, Ryan, she wept, her voice breaking. You did it. It's over. Not over. From the wreckage of the fleet, a new ship emerged, accelerating, burning hard for them. It was long, flat, and sharp as a razor, its prow glowing with a white-hot cutting field. Drome's last resort, the orbital scythe. Drome's voice, now a distorted, static-filled shriek of pure, terminal rage, filled the comms. If I cannot have the Empire, I will have your heart, Cantor. I will gut your ship, I will cut your bones. The scythe was coming, fast. It was designed to shear a dreadnought in half. Evasive, Sarika screamed at the console, but the ship was sluggish, unresponsive, her Cantor dying. Niara looked at the approaching scythe. She looked at Rowan, slumped and broken, bleeding out over her ship's heart. She would not let him die. Not like this. No, she said. She grabbed his limp hand, forcing it back onto the altar. Niara, no, it will kill you too, he tried to say. You and I, Rian. We survived the Jalu station, she said, her voice a sudden, iron command. We do not die alone. She tore the ancestral, living crown, a thin, bioluminescent circlet of jade and alloy from her own brow. It was her connection to the throne, her ancestors, the ship. She did not put it on him. She pressed it against his temple, holding his hand on the altar with her other hand, her armor grounding them both. Link, she commanded. The universe exploded. Jareen biotechnology, the ancient power of the living crown, slammed into human mutation. His song met her strength. Rowan gasped, a sound like a man drowning, as her life force, her alloyed bone resilience, poured into him. He felt her strength, but she felt his pain. Niara cried out, her knees buckling as the agony of his shattering bones flooded her senses. She felt his grief. She felt his loss. She saw Haven burn, and he felt her strength. The pain did not stop, but it receded. It was shared. The high-pitched whine in his ears faded. His vision cleared. He could stand. They stood together at the altar, hands linked, her crown pressed between them. A bio-alliance. A shared soul. "Ryan," she gasped, her face pale, streaked with his blood and her tears. He managed a ragged, terrible smile. His teeth stained red. "If we live through this, Niara." She knew what he was going to say. A flicker of her own dry humor returned. "We will be forced to talk about our status." "Cantor." "I know." He laughed, a wet, choking sound. "Agreed, Majesty." He turned his gaze, their gaze, to the view wall. The orbital scythe was seconds away, a blade of pure white energy aimed at their heart. "He's coming to cut us," Sarika yelled, her voice frantic. "Ria Niara, do something." Rowan looked at the approaching blade, his hand tightening on Niara's. His voice was no longer his. It was a duet, amplified by the ship, ringing with human resonance and Jareen power. "Cutting bones. Is he?" the duet voice whispered. "He should know better." Rowan lifted his free hand, still linked to Niara. "Let me hold the knife." He did not dodge. He did not flee. He met the scythe. He sang one final note, a note of pure, absolute gravity. He grabbed the scythe ship, not with a tractor beam, but with the fundamental force of the universe. The scythe, a marvel of engineering, built to be rigid, unstoppable, flew straight into Rowan's song, and the song bent. On the view wall, the impossible happened. The blade ship, traveling at impossible speeds, did not break. It did not explode. It curved, like a piece of hot steel being folded by a cosmic blacksmith. The scythe bent, its prow, its engines, its spine, it all warped, folding in on itself, the cutting field extinguishing as its own geometry was unmade. It crumpled like a ribbon of tin, a mangled, unrecognizable sculpture of failure. It tumbled past them, silent and dead. Absolute silence. The battle was over. On the view wall, the remaining ships of Drome's fleet, scattered and broken, powered down their weapons. And then, one by one, the loyalist ships of the Auric Empire, the ones that had been waiting, turned. They ignited their cannons, forming a perfect, closing ring around Drome's crippled, broken flagship. The coup was over. On the bridge of the Nocturne Crown, Rowan Hale released his grip on Niara's hand. The link broke. The song stopped. He pitched forward, unconscious before he hit the deck. The silence that followed the victory was deeper and heavier than the void. For a full minute, the bridge of the Nocturne Crown was a frozen tableau, the Empress and the Cantor, slumped together over the heart altar, and the Huntresses, scattered across the deck, staring in disbelief at the view wall where Drome's fleet had been annihilated. Sarika Dax was the first to move. The warrior's instinct overrode the shock. She tapped her comm, her voice rough. "Damage report," she barked. "Medical teams to the bridge. Priority 1. The Empress and the Cantor are down. All remaining fleet assets secure the wreckage of Drome's flagship. I want him alive." She moved to the altar. Niara was already stirring, pulling herself away from Rowan, her face pale and streaked with his blood. She was gasping, the feedback of sharing his power and his pain having nearly broken her. "Majesty," Sarika said, her voice softer than she thought possible. "He's not breathing," Niara whispered, her hand hovering over Rowan's still form. "Med team is en route." Sarika looked at the man who had saved them. The blue aura was gone. He looked small, impossibly human, soaked in his own blood, his face a mask of waxy, translucent white. He had been the vessel for a god, and the god had left the building. The doors to the bridge hissed open, and a full Jareen medical team swarmed in, their diagnostic tools whirring. Sarika pulled Niara gently to her feet. You must let them work. Majesty. I felt it. Sarika, Nyara murmured, her eyes distant, horrified. When we linked, I felt his bones shatter. I felt Haven burn. The cost. He paid it, Sarika said, her voice grim. Now let us ensure he did not pay it for nothing. She turned to the rest of her squad. Myla, you are with me. The rest of you. Secure the Empress. She strode from the bridge. Myla, clutching her splinted arm, jogging to keep up. The bridge of Drome's flagship was a ruin. The deck was canted at a 20-degree angle, venting atmosphere into the void. The Crown's final, surgical strike had crippled it without destroying it. Sarika and Myla moved through the wreckage, their boots crunching on shattered glass and frozen coolant. They found Malachar Drome in his command chair, pinned by a collapsed support beam, but very much alive. His armor was cracked, his face bloody, but his eyes were alive with a cold, unrepentant fury. So, he spat, the Empress sends her wounded hounds to finish the job. Sarika ignored him, her gaze sweeping the wrecked bridge. She saw the bodies of the Hounds of Glass, the humans in their mirrored armor, the ones Rowan had spoken of. He was right, Myla whispered, moving to one of the bodies. She had seen the Crown's insignia. She fumbled with the armor, her good hand pulling at the collar of the dead soldier's suit. And there it was, the fire-blackened disc, the sigil of the Haven colony. She ripped it from the corpse's neck and held it up, her splinted, foam-covered arm shaking with rage. You used them! You used the survivors of the massacre as your personal slaves. Drome threw his head back and laughed, a dry, rasping sound. Slaves. They were tools, booty, like their technology. The Bone Choir. Do you know how long my researchers studied that recording? The music of their deaths was the key, a perfect weapon. Sarika Dax moved so fast Drome did not even see her. Her armored hand snapped out, seizing the golden, braided tassels on his uniform, the symbol of his rank as Prime Regent. Malachar Drome, she said, her voice quiet, deadly, and carrying the absolute authority of the Empress. By the power of the Auric Empire, you are stripped of title, rank, and station. She tore the braids from his armor with a violent rip of fabric and metal. You are not a regent, she hissed. You are not a politician. You are a grave robber and a butcher. She leveled her sidearm at his head. And you are under arrest for the genocide at Haven, and for high treason against the Crown. Drome's laugh died. The mask of the politician was gone. He looked at her, his eyes cold and hollow. The human, he has poisoned you all. No, Myla said, her voice shaking but clear. He just opened the door and showed us the monster who was already inside. The medbay on the Nocturne Crown was silent, save for the steady 1-2 pulse of the ship's internal chronometer, the new heartbeat Rowan had given her. Rowan himself was unconscious, floating in a stabilization tank, a clear, shimmering gel holding his body in stasis. Nyara stood outside the tank, her armor finally removed. She wore simple, gray robes, her face scrubbed clean, but she looked exhausted, aged a decade in a single day. The Jareen chief doctor, an old formal warrior whose armor was white, stood beside her, reviewing a holographic display. Report, Doctor, Nyara said, her voice flat. It is complex, Majesty, the doctor said, his voice hesitant. His physiology is unlike anything I have ever encountered. His human bone structure is laced with a microcrystalline lattice, like spun glass. It is the source of his ability, Nyara said. Can you repair it? The doctor zoomed in on the display. It showed a representation of Rowan's bones, but they were fractured, riddled with millions of tiny, spidery cracks, like a sheet of ice that had been struck. Repair. Majesty, no, the doctor said, his voice grave. It is not broken. It is shattered. The crystalline links are not just damaged. They are severed. The song he sang, the sheer gravitic force he channeled it, overloaded his entire biology. He burned the system out from the inside. "But he is alive," Niara whispered, her hand tracing Rowan's form on the glass of the tank. "His human biology is resilient. It fights. But the canter itself, the part of him that is the weapon, is gone. It is a ruin." The doctor paused, then switched the display. "But that is not the worst of it. We analyzed his metabolic resonance, his cellular decay. This shattering it is not a new injury, Majesty. It is a cumulative one." He showed her another graph. "He has been doing this for years, small acts. The ghost in the code you spoke of, the stabilization of this very ship on the Jalu station. Every time he sang, on any significant scale, it cost him. It was a fire, and his life was the fuel. He has been dying for a very, very long time." Niara felt the floor tilt. "How long?" The doctor looked at her, his old eyes full of a reluctant pity. Had he never sung again, perhaps 5 years, 10. After what he did today, what he channeled to defeat Drome, he has accelerated the decay beyond recovery. He sighed. If he wakes, he has months, perhaps only weeks. He did not just save the Empire, Your Majesty. He spent his entire remaining life in 5 minutes. Niara closed her eyes. She felt the ghost of their linked consciousness, the shared agony, the impossible strength. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew the cost, and he paid for it." The news of Drome's arrest and the proof of his genocide at Haven spread through the fleet, and then the capital, with the speed of a shockwave. The Golden Braid Council, their authority built on Drome's lies, dissolved in a single session. The broadcasts, once filled with anti-human propaganda, now replayed that single, horrifying audio log of the dying child from Haven. The narrative of the human plague evaporated, replaced by a new, confusing, and powerful story, the human canter. The story was told in hushed tones in the barracks, in the markets of the capital. They spoke of the soft-boned archivist, who had been called a pet and a stray. The monster who, it turned out, was the only one who could stop the real monster. They whispered of a human who had heard the crown's pain and sung with her. A human who had bent physics. A human who had bled to save the very warriors who had pointed their spears at his throat. Sarika Dax returned to the Crown Bridge 2 days later. The ship was still docked at the primary orbital station for repairs. The 1-2 pulse of the lights felt steady, comforting. Crown's voice, now restored to its full, priestly harmony, resonated from the air. "The captain has returned. The poison is purged. The song is quiet." Sarika stood at the heart altar, where Rowan's bloodstains were still visible on the crystal. She placed her armored fist over her heart. "Crown," she said, "I wish to apologize. I was blind." "You were a creature of your duty, Captain," the AI's voice sang. "Duty, without truth, is a hollow thing. Cantor, he taught you the truth." "He did," Sarika agreed. She turned as Niara entered the bridge. She held out the small, blackened disc, the Haven sigil. "This is the proof the emergency tribunal needed," Sarika said. "Drome will not escape justice. The Golden Braid Council is gone." "And the order, Captain?" Niara asked. Sarika looked at her hands, her gauntlets, designed to crush and kill. "The Order of the Glaive were Drome's weapons. He taught us that our alloyed bones made us superior. He taught us that our strength was a hammer, meant to break those who were soft." She looked at the empty med tank where Rowan had been. Before, he had been moved to Niara's personal quarters to recover. "A soft-boned man," Sarika continued, "taught me that true strength is not a hammer. It is a shield. It is the willingness to break oneself to protect others. The order will change, Majesty. I will change it. We will be your shield, not your sword." A week passed. The Nocturne crown was healing. Rowan was also, in his way. He was awake. He was sitting in a wheelchair on a private observation deck, open to the void. The great, bruised purple curve of the capital world filled his vision. He was thin, his skin almost translucent, but his eyes were clear. He wore simple, soft robes. The door hissed open. Niara entered. She, too, was in simple robes. No armor, no crown. She was just a woman, her jade skin pale, her silver hair unbound. She stood beside him, and for a long time, they just watched the stars. "The doctor told me," she said finally, her voice quiet. "Of course he did," Rowan replied, his voice a dry rasp. "Jareen has no concept of patient confidentiality. It's appalling." "You knew," she said. It was not a question. "On the Jalous station, when you first saved my ship, you knew what it cost." "It was a small song," he said, shrugging. "A few notes. I thought I had time. To be quiet. To be an archivist. To find Drome. You found him." "I did," she turned, her hands gripping the railing. "Ryan Valerius, the Class 1 Cantor, is a wanted fugitive responsible for the Xylos collapse. Rowan Hale, the archivist, is a hero of the Auric Empire, the man who saved the capital." She looked at him, her eyes aching. "Both names are complicated. Both of them are lies. And both of them are dying." He said nothing, just watched her. "I am the Empress," she said, her voice finding a thread of its old steel. "I can fix this. I can give you a third name, a new identity, a quiet estate on the southern continent, where the air is warm, a new face, if you wish. No one would ever know. Ryan Valerius can be a ghost. Rowan Hale can be a legend. And you can just rest." Rowan was quiet for a long time. He looked at her, at the desperate hope in her eyes. He, the man who had lived his life wrapped in secrets, was being offered one final, perfect lie. A small, tired smile touched his lips. "A new identity," he rasped. "More lies. Gods, Niara. It sounds exhausting. And besides, who would brew your tea?" She stared at him, and then a sound she had not made in years, a genuine, startled laugh, escaped her. "You are impossible, Rian." "I'm human," he said, "stubborn and thirsty." He looked out at the stars. "Forget the new life. Forget the status of our relationship. Before we talk about any of that, let's just talk about tea. I would kill for a decent cup of oolong, the real kind. Not the synthesized poison they serve in the officer's mess." Niara wiped a tear from her eye, her smile watery but real. "That? Cantor that? I can arrange." As she was about to leave, the door opened again. It was Maela. She stood in the doorway, her good arm holding her newly cast one, her face a mixture of terror and resolve. "Majesty," she said, bowing deeply. "Cantor, sir." "Rowan is fine, Huntress," Rowan rasped. "Come in." "How is the hand?" Maela stepped onto the deck, her eyes fixed on him. "It will heal. They are regrowing the fragmented bone. It will be strong again." She was holding something in her good hand, the crude foam and plastic splint he had made for her in the corridor. "You kept that?" he asked. "A souvenir of my terrible bedside manner." "It is a reminder," Maela said, her voice shaking. "Of what I was, of who I was wrong." She stiffened, standing in a formal warrior's pose. "Archivist Rowan Hale, I wish to offer the bone oath. By the blood of my ancestors, and the strength of my new-grown bone, my life is forfeit to you. I owe you a life." Rowan looked at this young, intense warrior, and he felt profoundly tired. "A life, Maela? I wouldn't know what to do with it. I'm having enough trouble managing my own." He offered her a gentle smile. You want to pay the debt? Do you remember in the corridor I made a bad joke? Joke, sir. About soup. I said if we survived, I'd buy everyone soup. And you cried when we won because your teeth were intact. Maella blushed a deep, jade green. I was overwhelmed. Just keep your teeth safe, Huntress, Rowan said softly. Live a life that is worth the trouble we went to. Live a life that is kind. That's payment enough. Pay the debt back slowly by living well. Maella's eyes shone. She nodded, unable to speak, and bowed again before backing out of the room. When she was gone, Crown's voice filled the deck. It was soft, priestly, and full of a new warmth. She is correct. Cantor, you are owed many debts. Hello, Crown, Rowan whispered. It's good to hear your voice properly. Are you well? I am, the AI sang. I have analyzed the null note you composed, the safe harmonic. It is elegant. It is human. I have integrated it into my core protocols. I am teaching it to the Order. A new defensive art. A way to walk between the notes of death, as you taught them. Good, Rowan said, closing his eyes. That's good. You are no longer required as a weapon. Ryan Valerius. Crown's voice continued, a gentle absolution. Your song is part of me. Now, you are free. You may rest. We will sing our own song now. Rowan let out a breath he felt he had been holding for a decade. Thank you, Crown. The final loose end was Drome. He was being held in a null-G cell, a place of absolute silence, awaiting his public trial. Sarika Dax stood before the transparent wall, her armor gleaming. The tribunal is set, she said. You will answer for Haven. The entire Empire will hear that child's voice. Drome floated in the center of the cell, his face impassive. He smiled, a cold, thin expression. I will, he said, and I will be remembered as the one who tried to stop the real threat, the one you have now embraced. The only threat here, Sarika said, is you, Malachar. Is it? Drome sneered. You've put all your faith in your new hero, your broken bone savior, your dying human pet. But you were there, Captain. You were there from the beginning. You heard the crown when you first boarded. She was warning us of your choir, Sarika said. Was she think, Captain? Her words. Your bones won't survive him. Not it. Him. You assumed she meant me. You assumed she meant the hounds. But the human, the cantor. He shattered my hounds with a thought. He bent the scythe. He broke his own bones, channeling a power you cannot even comprehend. Sarika stared at him, her newfound certainty wavering. He saved us, she insisted. He saved you today, Drome whispered, his smile widening. But that thing you unleashed on your bridge, that is not a man. That is a god, and gods are fickle. You think you are safe now? You have just invited the oldest monster of all back into your home. Ask your precious ship, Sarika. Ask her who she was really warning you about. He leaned back, closing his eyes, his smirk fixed in place. The seed was planted. Sarika stood in the silence, staring at the traitor, a new, cold dread settling in her heart. The ceremony was held on the grand observation deck, a vast expanse of polished obsidian, now open to the void. A single, shimmering force field held the atmosphere in, a transparent skin against the infinite, silent tapestry of space. Below, the capital world of Aurea Prime hung like a bruised purple pearl, its orbital cannons, once aimed at its own heart, now pointed outward, silent and protective. It was a cleansing, a funeral for an age. Empress Nyara stood before a simple, starlight-fueled altar. She wore no armor, no robes of state. She was clad in simple, unadorned white, her silver hair unbound. Before her, her surviving huntresses stood at perfect attention, their black armor gleaming, a stark contrast to the white-robed priests of the crown. Sarika Dax was at the head of the formation, her posture rigid, her face unreadable. Beside her, Myela, her right arm now in a new, bioformed cast, her splinted, foam-covered relic tucked into her belt, watched the Empress with an almost painful reverence. Niara held two objects in her hands. In her left, she held the small, fire-blackened, and warped metal disc that Myla had recovered from Drome's flagship, the sigil of the Haven colony, the symbol of humanity's deepest wound. In her right, she held the ancestral, bone-gold circlet of the Jareen Empress, the living crown, the symbol of her power, her history, and her divine right to rule. In silence, she stepped forward. She placed the Haven sigil on the star altar first. Then, after a long, deliberate pause, she placed her own crown beside it. Not above it, not below it. Beside it. Equals. Two halves of a broken galaxy, offered to the stars. Today, we do not mourn the end of a war. Nyara's voice was quiet, yet it carried across the deck, broadcast to the fleet and the world below. We mourn the beginning of one. We mourn the sin of our own certainty. We mourn the propaganda that named an entire species plague. We mourn the children of Haven. She turned, her gaze sweeping over her warriors. And we honor the one who paid the price for our blindness. We honor the human cantor Rowan Hale, who taught us that the softest bones can bear the greatest strength, and that the greatest strength is the willingness to be a shield, not a sword. She looked at Sarika. The age of the sword is over. Sarika looked back, her jaw tight, and gave a single, slow, affirming nod. The political resolution was faster and colder. On the bridge of the Nocturne Crown, now scrubbed clean of blood and chaos, the great heart altar pulsed with a steady, healthy, soft green light. The emergency strobes were gone, replaced by the ship's ambient illumination, which pulsed in that same, new, steady rhythm. 1-2, 1-2. Niara stood at the state console, Sarika at her side, a witness. The main view wall showed not the void, but a complex, holographic document written in the angular script of the Jareen and the flowing text of human standard. The optimal accord. With this seal, Niara said, placing her hand on the console, the Auric Empire hereby recognizes the full sovereignty of the scattered human coalition worlds. We end the truce, and we begin a formal alliance. The borders are open. Reparations for the Haven massacre will be paid in full. She pressed her hand down. The document flashed green, signed and ratified. It is done, Niara said, a weight seeming to lift from her shoulders. The galaxy will not be the same, Sarika said, her voice low. The remaining Loyalist Council members are terrified, but they accept your terms. Drome's trial is next month. The evidence that the audio file has broken them. It has broken the lie, Niara corrected. Now we build the truth. How is your order, Captain? We are learning, Sarika admitted. Crown she is teaching us. The null note. The safe harmonic that the cantor wrote. She calls it walking between the notes of death. It is a defensive art. Not one of us has mastered it. It requires letting go. A softness we were never taught. Then you will learn it, Niara said. You will be the first. You will teach them how to be shields. Yes, Majesty. Rowan Hale was healing. Or, more accurately, he was dying. But he was doing it slowly, and with a surprising amount of comfort. He was in Niara's personal quarters, which had been converted into a state-of-the-art medical suite. He was no longer in the tank, but on a soft, wide bed, propped up by pillows. The wall was a window, looking out onto the same view of the capital world. He was impossibly thin. his skin like old paper, but his eyes were clear. The 1-2 beat was here, too. A soft, ambient pulse from the lights, the air recyclers, the very bulkheads. It was the ship, matching her rhythm to his. The nocturne crown was breathing with him, a constant, gentle companion, reminding his own failing heart of its duty. The door hissed open, and Niara entered, alone. She had shed her state robes and wore the same simple, soft gray that Rowan himself favored. She looked less like an empress and more like the woman he had known on the Jalou station. She pulled a chair to his bedside. For a long time, they said nothing, just existing together in the rhythmic, breathing silence of the ship. "If you're here for the official medical report, Majesty," Rowan rasped, his voice a dry, papery thing. "The status is still breathing, which, all things considered, is a stunning achievement." A small smile touched her lips. "I am not here for a medical report, Rowan. I am here because we promised. If we lived." Rowan sighed, a long, slow exhalation that seemed to cost him. "Ah, the status discussion. Right. I suppose Hero of the Empire and Empress are complicated, and that is before we factor in the fugitive war criminal part." "Or the part where we linked," she said, her voice soft, her gaze dropping to his hands, which were thin and pale on the blankets. "When I shared the load, I saw Haven. Ryan, I felt your bones shatter, all of them. The ones from years ago, and the ones from that day. And I," he whispered, "saw the coronation. I felt the weight of that crown. It's heavier than a dreadnought. Niara, I do not envy you." They were quiet again. The intimacy of that link, the telepathic, biological sharing of agony and power, hung between them, a thing far more profound than the desperate kiss that had preceded it. "You kissed me," he said, stating a simple fact. "You kissed me," she corrected, a flicker of her old sarcasm returning. "And I believe my exact words were that we would be forced to talk about it. I did not imply I would enjoy it." He chuckled, which turned into a dry, painful cough. She instinctively reached out, placing her hand on his. Her alloyed, strong fingers, gentle on his frail, soft-boned skin. "Ryan Rowan," she started. "Just Rowan," he said, turning his hand over, his fingers brushing hers. Ryan Valerius, he died at Haven. I'm just the archivist he left behind. Rowan. Then," she took a breath. "The doctor told me. The extent of it. The timeline. There is no new life on a southern continent. There is no rest." He looked at their joined hands. His scarred and pale. Hers. Elegant, jade green, and strong. "The song is over, Niara. I sang too high. The strings are broken." She felt the tears well, hot and sudden. "It is not fair. You saved us all. You saved me, twice. And the price is everything." "Not everything," he whispered. He looked up, his eyes, though sunken, were still bright. "I got to see Drome's face when I bent his scythe. That was worth a few months." He smiled. That small, tired, self-deprecating smile. "And I still owe you that cup of tea. It seems terrible. What did you call it, a stray?" "A pet," she corrected, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Worse. A stray pet who makes promises he cannot keep." He squeezed her hand, a flicker of his old strength. "Oaths are heavy, Niara. Maela offered me one. I told her I was not strong enough to hold it." "She told me," Niara said. "She also told me about the joke. About teeth. And soup." "A terrible joke," he agreed. "She said she is paying her debt by living well." "A good plan." Niara looked at him, at this impossible, dying, brilliant man. He had saved her world, shifted her entire culture, and all he wanted was a cup of tea. "Then we will not speak of oaths," she said, her voice finding its resolve, "or of status, or of ghosts, or of timelines." She stood, but she did not release his hand. "We will speak of tea, and since you are clearly in no condition to brew it, Cantor, you will rest, and you will let me brew it for you. For a change." He looked up at her, a genuine, warm light filling his eyes. "That, Majesty, sounds like a perfect accord." They were interrupted by the chime of the door. Sarika Dax stood in the doorway, her black armor looking out of place in the soft, quiet room. Her face was a mask of deep, troubled conflict. "Majesty," she said, bowing. "Rowan, I apologize for the intrusion, but I must ask." "Ask, Captain," Nyara said, her voice gentle. Sarika stepped into the room. "The trial. Drome. I delivered the final charges to him today. He said something, a seed of doubt that I cannot shake." Rowan watched her, his expression neutral. "What did he say, Captain?" "He said," Sarika took a breath, "he said that I was a fool, that I had put my faith in the broken bone savior. He reminded me of the first moment I boarded this ship, the first warning from the Crown." "The warning," Nyara said, frowning. "Your bones won't survive him." "Yes," Sarika insisted, her gaze locking onto Rowan. I assumed she meant Drome, or his choir. But Drome said she meant you." The room was suddenly cold. The 1-2 pulse of the ship felt loud in the silence. "He said you were him," Sarika pressed, her voice urgent. "That you are a god, a monster, the real threat. That we had just invited the oldest enemy of all back into our home. He told me to ask the ship, to ask her who she was really warning us about." Nyara looked at Rowan. He was not looking at her. He was looking out the window, at the stars, his expression unreadable. "Rowan," Nyara whispered. Rowan was silent for a long moment. Then, he let out a long, slow breath. "Crown," he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. The AI's voice, the warm, priestly chorus, filled the room. "I am here, Cantor." "The captain has a question," Rowan said, his eyes still on the void. "She deserves the truth. We all do." Nyara looked from Rowan to the ceiling, then back. "Crown, what is the truth? The original warning, when Captain Dax and her Huntresses first boarded, the full audio, the full diagnostic. Play it." "As you wish, Majesty." The room filled with the sound. It was Crown's voice, but not as she was now. It was the voice from before, colder, more formal, the voice of an ancient, analytical priest. "I have analyzed the threat parameters associated with your forcible entry," the AI's voice echoed, the recording sharp and clear. "I have cross-referenced your alloyed bone physiology against the approaching energy signature. My calculations are absolute." And then, the line, heavy as a prophecy. "Your bones won't survive him." "Yes," Sarika said. "That who is him?" "Who?" Rowan turned his head on the pillow, his gaze finally meeting Sarika's. His eyes were full of deep, old sadness. "Crown," he whispered. "Play archive file, Jalus Cantor Protocol. Authorization Valerius Omega." Nyara's hand flew to her mouth. Sarika stared, confused. "Acknowledged," Crown said. The great view wall, which had been showing the stars, flickered. It was no longer a window. It was a recording. The image was from the bridge, the Nocturne Crown's bridge, but it was years ago. It was dark, the ship running on low power, the lights flickering with a different, erratic beat. And at the heart altar, a man was standing. It was Rowan, but it was not. It was Ryan Valerius. He was younger, his face unlined, his body strong, not broken. He wore the tattered gray fatigues of a coalition refugee. His hands were on the crystal, glowing with a faint, blue, controlled light. Crown's voice spoke, the voice from the recording. Your composition is complete, Cantor. The safe harmonic is integrated. My gravity song is stable. You have saved us. The image of the younger Rowan nodded, his face tight with exhaustion. It's stable, Crown. But I need one more thing. A failsafe. A final protocol. A failsafe what? The AI asked. Ryan Valerius leaned his head against the crystal, his voice a low, haunted confession. Against me, Crown. This power of the song comes from the void. I've lost control of it before. At Xylos. It is an unmade corridor. It sings loudly. What if? One day I am the one who sings too high. I do not understand, Cantor. The AI said. If I am ever on this ship again, the younger Rowan said, his voice a terrible, binding oath. And I am not myself if I am in pain, or in rage if I begin to sing that song. The one that breaks things, you must not obey me. You must warn them. Warn whom? Anyone, Ryan whispered, his eyes closing. Anyone who stands against me. Anyone who stands with me. You must warn them to run. You must tell them what I am. What is the warning? Ryan Valerius. The image on the screen zoomed in on the younger Rowan's face, his eyes full of a terrible, lonely self-knowledge as he forged the shackle for his own soul. Tell them, he whispered. Tell them, your bones won't survive him. The recording ended. The view wall returned to the stars. The room was utterly, profoundly silent, broken only by the 1-2 beat of the ship, the steady rhythm of Rowan's heart. Sarika Dax stared, her mind finally, truly broken open. The warning had never been a ship's threat. It had been a promise to the ship, a self-imposed cage, built by a man terrified of his own power. It was not a prophecy of an external enemy. It was a confession. The him was Rowan. He had been, all along, the only monster he truly feared. Nyara was weeping, her head bowed, her hand clutching his. She finally understood the full measure of his sacrifice, not just his life, but his very identity, his willingness to be the monster in his own story, to build his own prison, just in case. Rowan looked at them, his face pale, his duty finally, completely done. He pushed a button on his chair, wheeling himself slowly to the great window, until his face was almost touching the transparent field. He looked out at the darkness, at the pinpricks of light. He raised one, thin, trembling hand, placing it on the railing, feeling the steady, rhythmic thump-thump of his own heart, echoed by the great, living dreadnought all around him. He smiled, that small, tired smile. Not singing high today, he whispered. The lights on the bulkhead pulsed, soft as a breath. 1-2, the nocturne crown breathed.